So we should see attendees start to pop in when they can. Yeah, here we go. All right, people who are joining, we have a little question for you to answer in the chat, just so we can get an idea of who's here and how you're all feeling. So that would be great if you want to just, put your name, where you're from, and tell us how you feel about your current legislators in the chat. And we will probably wait a little bit and get going in a few minutes. All right. Emily has done it. She has put her location in the chat. She is super brave. Let's hope some other people do as well. Hi, Julianne. I'm so glad you're here. Julianne and I got to hang out yesterday at the Guilford County Voters Coalition. That was great. Brenda, Dr. Brenda Fairfax, one of my favorite people. All right, so we will keep giving people some time to hop on. If you've just come on, we have a question for you to answer in the chat. So we can kind of get to know everyone a little bit. And then we'll get going in a few minutes. All right, so if you have just joined, we have a question for you to answer in the chat, your name, where you're from, how you're feeling about your current legislators in the NCGA. I'll probably give it a couple more minutes for people to hop on and then we'll get going. Eileen is not stoked about her legislators, which I can sympathize with. Ellie, I would also like to borrow Deb Butler. She is one of my favorite people, so I feel that. Let's all borrow Deb Butler. Yeah, I have the little "We shall not yield" sticker on the back of my car, so everyone knows I'm a super fan. Thank you, Michelle. If anyone knows me, if you've watched the redistricting leadership program videos or been to any other meetings, I change my hair all the time. It's just it's sort of, after a couple months, I usually get bored and you'll see something else. So. All right, well, I think, a fair amount of people have joined. So we will go ahead and get started. And so just to say, this is our first statewide meeting of our legislator accountability team. So this is a program that All on the Line North Carolina is starting to sort of keep our legislators accountable through the redistricting process. So wonderful that you all have said in the chat where you're from. Keep that going. But Carrie, do you want to go to the next slide real quick? So the other thing that I'm hoping y'all can do is fill out this form that I'm going to put a link in the chat for right now. This is sort of our team assignment form. It's just going to ask you what county you live in, who's your House rep and who's your senator. And that will be, and also, you know, I'll put the Find Your Legislators link in the chat as well, in case you aren't sure. So you can use that to find them. And that's how we're going to assign people out onto teams. We're going to assign people to teams that are, for the legislators that they actually have, or at least for legislators that are like in their county or really close by. So if you all would go and fill that out, that would be fantastic. And then we can actually, after this meeting, start sorting people into teams, giving you real actions to do, working with you on team building and all that kind of stuff. All right. So I am going to go ahead and just kind of start us off. So we are here because we're working on these legislative accountability teams. And I think I just wanted to start with a little bit of a story as to why I think these are important. So some of you probably remember pretty well, back in 2019, we had these court-ordered redraws, right? So our maps got taken to the court over being partisan gerrymanders. The court agreed that they were, and they ordered the legislature to redraw the maps. And one of the things that did happen during that process, unfortunately, I had just started this job and was kind of super new. We didn't have a lot of relationships with legislators yet. And what we saw happen was in the Senate Redistricting Committee, we saw a bunch of Democrats vote for maps that were not great. Vote for maps that were what we thought were probably still partisan gerrymanders. And that was a big problem. And so what we kind of did as a follow-up was we asked people to email, to call those senators and tell them that they were disappointed in the vote that they took. And people did it. And one thing that came out of that was really meaningful for me was that I was in the office of one of those legislators who took one of those bad votes. And that person was on the brink of tears, basically, in front of me, because so many people had called and emailed them. And they were saying to me, I don't know, what if I lose my seat because of this? Because of you all, everyone thinks that I did a bad job. And now it's, this person was super upset. And I don't know what this says about me, but in that moment, I kind of was sitting there thinking to myself, wow, I feel that power. Like, this is for me, it was like actually a really big moment in the sense that, not that I enjoy making anyone cry, but it just drove home to me how effective that kind of accountability work can be. And, I thought about, okay, well, what if we had gotten to this person before they took this bad vote? Clearly, this is a person who is, not really influenced by when their constituents call them out. Like, this is a person who's affected by that. So what if, that person had been called and emailed beforehand and had been told not to take that vote? I think we probably would have had a really strong impact. So that's sort of the idea that these teams came out of, that we can really impact those legislators. We can hold them accountable. We can keep them from taking bad votes. We can keep them from putting forward bad maps. We can keep them from accepting things. And we can at least, if, even if someone is, stubborn as a rock, like, we can make it as painful as possible for them to do the wrong thing. And I think that in and of itself is meaningful. So that is where this idea for these legislative accountability teams came from, is from that experience. Another story that I will tell you really quickly about, similarly, during the congressional redraw in 2019, we saw some early versions of the map that was ultimately enacted. And those versions were cutting the county of Cumberland in half. So they're basically scooping out the part of Cumberland County that is, where Fayetteville is, and that where there are lots of majority Black neighborhoods, and putting into one district and putting the rest of the county into another district. And it was something that, we raised a lot of, clamor about. We, asked people from Fayetteville and from that area to contact the redistricting committee about it. I did a lot of Twitter threads about it, and we made it an action item. And, I'm not going to say that our current congressional map is great. I don't think it is. But if you look at it, Cumberland County is kept whole in that map. And it wasn't kept whole in that map in the previous version. And I think that that is also another example of where, our pressure on legislators actually made David Lewis. And if you all know anything about David Lewis, he's like not a great map guy, and, no longer around for like certain reasons that are crimey. But we made him change his map. And I think that's really impressive. We didn't get what I would call a fair map, but we had an impact. So that is what I want to bring to you all right now. That is the idea here, is that, as much as I think people who are fighting for fair maps in North Carolina can get discouraged because we have been the target of gerrymandering for so long, there have been these moments, there have been these wins. And, we had those wins when, I had just started this job and we were super disorganized, to be perfectly honest. And now with you all's help and with these teams, I think we can make a much bigger impact. So that is the idea here. That's the idea behind these teams, and why we're doing this. And Carrie, you can stop sharing your screen if you'd like to. Okay, great. I'm going to share those links again for the assignment form, for the team assignment form, and for Find Your Legislator, so that you can use those. Again, this is so that we can sort you into an actual team based on who your legislators are. So if you would go ahead and fill that out, that would be fantastic. Because our next follow-up steps are going to be based on where you are, what team you're going to be on. So the next things that I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about the redistricting process timeline that we're dealing with this year, and what's going, what we think is going to happen there, and why, again, it's so crucial for us to start working now. And then also I'm going to talk a little bit generally about the things that we can, the things that sort of we can influence and try to fight for. And then I will introduce our new digital organizer. I'm so glad that she's here. She's going to be someone who's going to be like a big support for you all through this work. And then we will have plenty of time at the end for Q&A. So if you want to put a question in Q&A, use the Q&A function. It's a little bit easier for us than trying to go back through the chat and find questions if it's possible. And then also we can have people raise their hands at the end and actually have you ask a question live if that's what you'd like to do. So, so the current timeline. So some of you may have heard that the census kind of came out with what we hope is sort of their final word on when the redistricting data is going to go out. And we are not going to get that redistricting data until September 30th. So that's a while off. And the other date to keep in mind here is our filing deadline. So people who want to run for office have to file for office, and there's a deadline by which they have to do that so that State Board of Elections can put together ballots and stuff like that. And that deadline for us is December 17th. So not too long between those dates. And then it's even further abbreviated because the State Board of Elections actually needs that information way before the filing deadline. So they need it like at least a month before the filing deadline. So that, puts us sort of mid to early November. So we could possibly get a redistricting process that only lasts a month. For me, that sounds like a nightmare, right? One thing that has happened this week is that Karen Brinson Bell, who's the head of the State Board of Elections, has recommended that we push our primary elections back. So you all probably remember that, I don't know if it was before 2018 or just before 2020, but we used to have our primaries in May. So we used to be a little bit towards the end of like the primary cycle. And, then people know it was already kind of over. No one cared about who North Carolina wanted to be president. And so they moved up that primary to March. And so we used to have our filing dates in February and then a primary in May. And now we have the filing dates in December and a primary in March. And so what the head of the NC State Board of Elections did is recommended that we go back to having a May primary, basically just move everything back to where it used to be. I think that makes a lot of sense. It's something that people have already done before, at least it's something that they're already used to. Phil Berger, who is a president pro tem of our Senate, said that Karen Britzenbill basically was being hysterical when she recommended that. So that says to me that there's not going to be legislative initiative to actually move those deadlines back. Berger, horrible. I don't know how such like a horrible person is just like having their picture on that NCGA website every day. It's just not fair. They need to take him off the front page. Anyway, so we could be in a situation where we have a month to do all of the redistricting we need to do at least, state legislative redistricting and congressional, we would have to finish that in that month. And I think that without any pressure, Republican leadership is going to sit around and not do anything and then act at the last minute when they get the data and say, oh, we don't have time to have public hearings and we don't have time to like do transparency and let people see what we're doing. I believe that they're going to use that as an excuse. And so to go into sort of what we, hopefully can do now is that we can start putting some pressure on the legislature for them to start working on some of the things that they can already work on. So they can already work on, criteria, which is like the rules that they use to draw the maps. They don't need data for that. They can set up a public hearing schedule. I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't think most people need up-to-date census data to tell you what their neighborhood looks like and what district they'd like to see. So there's a lot of stuff that they can do right now, and they're not going to do it unless there is some major pressure on them. So that I think is one thing we can do right now. And frankly, the other thing that I think we can do that's really important is we can start developing relationships with these legislators. I will tell you, it is a lot more meaningful to them when people, they know you email them pretty often. Maybe you and a few other people have this team that they've maybe heard of, that they're hearing from on the regular. Those people know that the super engaged people are the ones that are going to make their lives the most difficult if they do something that's not great. And so that's sort of what we need to have to happen, is to sort of take some of this time and not just put pressure on them to do the right things for the process, but also to develop that relationship and sort of build that up so that when October rolls around and you email them, they know exactly who you are. And maybe they had, a Zoom meeting with you and your 4 other team members a couple months ago. So that's sort of what we're looking to do. And so I think that's what we can do. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our digital organizer. I think some of you probably may already know her, but I'm going to go ahead and read her bio because it's very nice. Bree Bro is a lifelong North Carolinian, former professional photographer and political organizer. In 2017, she co-founded an all-volunteer grassroots voter outreach organization called Flip NC. Still, my absolute favorite t-shirt that I own is a Flip NC shirt. And I always put off wearing it until the very end of my laundry because it's so nice. And most recently, she led the NC Wins Coalition, connecting grassroots groups across North Carolina with state level policy and electoral priorities. So Bree, I'll let you go ahead and talk a little bit about, what kind of things we're actually going to be doing with people.
Great. Thanks, Leica. It's really nice to be here and to see so many folks on this call who are engaged and ready to go and hold some legislators accountable and really advocate for the fairest maps that we can get this year. I'm super excited to be in this position. This is an issue that I feel really passionately about. I am ready to get into good trouble too. Yes, Julianne, thank you. I think that this is just such a foundational issue for democracy. And I know all of you do too, or you wouldn't be here. So like Leica mentioned, and she just dropped the form again, we really want you to fill out this form so we can see who's here and where you all are. And we're gonna work to figure out like who are geographically and constituency in the same area so we can put folks on teams. And then our plan is to really like build an action plan with you, working together with the teams to figure out what makes the most sense. I'm going to be really interested in knowing, what y'all know about your legislators already, because some of you probably already have relationships. And so we'll meet in small teams as it makes sense to do that. We'll come up with a good action plan. Like I said, I actually start next week, so I haven't like fully fleshed out what that plan looks like, but I think there's a lot of opportunity for emails and for engaging other folks in our communities and for phone calls and meetings with legislators. And then I'm hoping that we can also have like a month. I think the plan is to have a monthly meeting, a big meeting, so that we can kind of stay in touch, provide updates and hear from folks how it's going, what you're hearing, and really like work together on this to make as strong a advocacy plan as we possibly can. So I'm super excited and ready to get started.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Bree. And I'm super, super excited to have her here because she knows a lot more about organizing than I know. And I think she's going to be such a great support for you all. So I think that what I think we would like to go ahead and do is, I don't want this to be a super long meeting. I know that everyone sits on Zoom all the time now, and it's just like endless and everyone's tired. So, but I would like to just offer some time for people to ask some questions. And I think we have some questions that are in the Q&A section, and we also have someone who's raised their hand. So if you've raised your hand, I'll go ahead and allow you to talk. So this person's email is EK Keel. So if that's you, I think that may be Emily who said at the beginning. I'm unmuting you right now. Yeah, go for it.
Well, that was a mistake, actually. I didn't realize I had done that, but there is a program that's for us to take. Is there an online didactic thing? Did I see that?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure. Can you say that again?
Is there a program that you have put out for us to take, a brief educational thing?
Yeah, so here, I will put that in the chat as well. We have this, what we call our redistricting leadership program. And this is basically like an online course that I've put together with videos about different aspects of the North Carolina redistricting process and some of the history about previous redistricting processes and some of the important court cases that have happened. So yeah, so I put that in the chat and you can sign up for that and look at that there. And what I will say about it, it's pretty in depth. So if you want to be your big redistricting nerd, go for it. If you want to look at what's there and kind of fill in things that you want to know and kind of pick and choose, I think that's great too. So so yeah, thank you so much. And thank you so much for giving me a chance to promote that, because I like promoting that stuff.
Thank you.
All right. So I'll go to some of the questions that are in the Q&A section. Ellie says some people have been talking about pushing the election till 2022. Yeah, so I think what you've actually heard about is related to the municipal elections. So our city elections, like city council and mayor. So in North Carolina, most cities, city elections take place in these like weird off years. So the year after a presidential or a congressional election. And weirdly, I know in Raleigh they like take place in October, which is also really weird. But so they usually take place in this year, and that's what they're proposing moving to 2022 is those municipal elections. So not the like overall congressional elections or state legislative elections or anything like that. Those were already going to be in 2022. It's the municipal elections that they were going to move. All right. So Karen asks on this federal issue, do you have a summary of HR 1? AOTL National sent out a mass mailing to oppose it. I don't think that's true, but I think that we do probably have some talking points on it that I can link in whatever follow-up emails we do. Do we have data to show the issues in current maps? So one thing I am really hoping to do is to do some geographically specific trainings. You know, everything that happened in the maps from 2017 is the stuff that's going to happen again. The same places are going to be targeted. So it's going to be like Wilmington, the suburbs of Charlotte, Greensboro, Winston-Salem, Greenville, like all the same places that were gerrymandered in the past are probably the same places that are going to be targeted this time around. So, you know, I'm really hoping to do some geographically specific trainings in the future so we can kind of address that stuff. Do we have a list of which senators voted yes, no on the current maps? I don't, but I can find that for you pretty easily. And like, I don't know, maybe it's a good thing to keep in mind. All right. Madeline says, I live in New York. Is there anything I can do to help? I put my email in the chat box. And if you, okay, Karen says to support HR1. Okay, I was really confused there for a second, sorry. But if you don't live in North Carolina, I'd say send me an email. And I know that we have like adopt a state stuff if you specifically want to work on North Carolina stuff, or we can hook you up to All on the Line National. You know, I think there are a lot of different opportunities. All right, so I'll go to a live question now. So Suzanne, I see you. I unmuted you, Suzanne.
Yeah, I did. Thanks, Leica. It's so good to see you and
good to see you too.
Your powerful new team. Congratulations. So I got in late. It took a while to get admitted. And so I came in when you were talking about the decision on when the primary would occur. And I heard the bad news that the misbehavior by some man calling somebody hysterical, and then just basically saying, no, we're going to leave it the way it is now. Is that done? Is there any way still to put pressure on that process?
Yeah, no, so it's not decided. It's something that the legislature could still do. You know, they have the power to move those deadlines back. So, I mean, I think that will probably be part of some of the work these legislative accountability teams will do, because I think that is something that there won't be pressure on it. And I also know that on the Democratic side, at least, there's been some legislators who've been interested in doing that. So I think that's definitely something that we can still push on in the same way we want to push on sort of transparency and public input measures and stuff. So yes.
What do you think the timeline will be when that will be decided?
So I would say if that's going to happen, it would probably be decided before end of this session. So usually what happens is redistricting takes place in the regular session, and the regular session, long session, usually takes place from January to about late June, July. And what they're proposing this year, because the census delay, they're proposing to like end session at the normal time in July and then do a special session for redistricting. So I would assume that if they have not decided to do that by the end of regular session, it's not going to happen. So that's what that's my instinct about it, is that if by the time they would go to the special session, it's going to be probably almost too late to do all the logistics for that. So yeah.
Right. So I just want to let you know that, I also work with Andrea Miller and Reclaim Our Vote. And I know that she would be really interested in helping get up phone banks, text banks, things like that, with the data sets that they've got on constituents in the state. So just to plant that. Anyway, it's really nice to see you all.
Yeah, great to see you. So Suzanne is one of our volunteers out of California. She's done a ton of work in North Carolina with us and a bunch of other groups. She's always been super helpful. And yeah, Suzanne, I would love for you to be able to make that connection. All right, I'll try to answer some more of the questions in the Q&A. Do we know when the reapportionment info will come out? Leslie's asking us, and whether North Carolina will gain a seat in Congress. So, I mean, I feel like bad at my job because I don't remember the exact, they did give a date for when the apportionment data will come out. I don't remember what it is. I think it is the end of May. Someone can correct me if they know better. Oh, I just lost the question that was in front of me. But anyway, that we are probably going to gain a seat in Congress. I think that's probably going to happen. I think everyone kind of agrees that just based on, their population estimates, it would be very difficult for us not to gain a seat, and also thinking about like what's going on in other states, populations as well. Okay. Carrie very helpfully says that apportionment data is going to come out on April 30th. So the apportionment data will come out on April 30th, and then the actual full data that they need to do redistricting will be September 30th. All right. Let me go to Dr. Monica. Dr. Monica, I'm going to unmute you so you can ask your question. I think you are still muted yourself.
All right.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much, and for all the work that you're doing. Just yesterday, and you may have been speaking to this just when I got on, we were talking about a trend, what seems to be a trend of unaffiliated voters. So that not red, not blue, but I think the color was yellow, subscribed to them. And I was just wondering, how are we going to kind of get a grasp on, if they're drawing the maps and now they're mostly yellow, what does that mean?
Yeah, so I think that actually because we have past elections data, we actually have a pretty good idea of what those people's partisan lean is. So the truth about unaffiliated voters is that most of the unaffiliated voters tend to vote for one party or the other pretty regularly. So they may be registered unaffiliated, but in terms of how they actually vote, they probably vote like they belong to one or other of the parties. And so because we have sort of statewide election results and stuff like that, and we kind of know where those voters are, we will actually have like a pretty good idea of the different partisan nature of different maps. So, but thanks for that question. I think that's a really good question because we're at a point at which I think, basically it's like 30, 30, 30 in terms of like voter identification.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, Martha is asking, what things should we ask our Democratic legislators for? Is this something that we can go over in detail later? I like the idea of a group of us asking for a meeting with our legislators, but would like to have a detailed ask for redistricting. Yes, so I mean, this is something we will definitely be giving you. So one thing that we're hoping to do next week is to go ahead and send you all basically a template email to kind of start off your conversation with legislators. And there are a couple versions of that template that we will offer for you to use, but one of them actually has some specific policy asks around transparency and public input. So it says, we should have, all these meetings should be in public. We should have at least 2 weeks of notice. All these files should be available. We should have public hearings so that, everyone across the state can attend, stuff like that. So that actually is in there, and we will have more detailed versions of that going forward. But if you want to start that conversation now, that we will actually be giving you something that lets you do that. All right. And then Julianne asked, is this a good time to talk about sharing all the line information at precinct meetings? I think, Julianne, maybe we should connect about this in general, like offline, maybe we can start an email between you and me about it, and what makes sense. But the other thing that I would say, and that this makes me think of, is just sort of, if you all already have some local like affiliations or local groups that you're involved in, groups that you think might be interested in redistricting, we would love to have you make some of those connections, because this is really going to take people all across the state. It's going to take people, in every area, and honestly, in a lot of areas where we may not already have direct connections, or we may not already have a ton of volunteers. Maybe you live somewhere where you're going to be one of the first people who's on a legislator accountability team from your area. But I'm sure most of the places that people live, there are other kinds of, activist groups and grassroots organizations that do, progressive work, that would be interested in doing work around redistricting. We're really hoping to, if you all have those connections, to be sort of a resource for whatever group, for whatever kind of work they want to do around redistricting. So I'm going to put my email in the chat again. So if, there are connections you want to make like that, please just reach out to me directly. I'd love to help out with that. And to be honest, the local connections that we have made have mostly come from volunteers like y'all. Okay, it was really hard to talk and type that email address at the same time. All right, okay, I see another question in the Q&A. Skip says, do you see the benefit in this effort being built as a bipartisan effort? Is this effort limited only to leveraging votes for specific redistricting maps, or will you try to influence how and by whom the maps are designed? So I will say that, I think in an ideal world, I think that this is definitely a bipartisan effort on the grassroots side, I would say. I think there are plenty of Republicans who don't agree with gerrymandering. If we've seen polling in North Carolina, Republicans hate gerrymandering almost as much as anyone else. And so, and I know that there are other, that there are grassroots groups that work on redistricting stuff that have Republican members, because, like, cheating is cheating, and I think most people don't like it. So what I will say is, I think this will hopefully be a bipartisan effort on the grassroots side, because everything that All in the Line says is we're for nonpartisan, independent redistricting. We think that there should be a citizens redistricting commission, and that it should be taken out of the hands of politicians altogether, and that maps should really be about representing the communities that we actually have, and not, for any political advantage. And I would just want to personally say that I was volunteering around redistricting issues before I got this job. This was, I lucked into this because this was already the issue that I was the most passionate about. And my objective has always been to do what is best for the people of North Carolina in this issue. That's always been the thing that I keep in top of mind. And so, yeah, I think that this, theoretically can be a bipartisan issue. What I will say is that, I think that in our legislature, we have a Republican majority. That Republican majority is kind of uniquely sort of hierarchical, and is run very much in that way. So there's not a lot of dissent in the ranks, because they kind of tend to keep their people in line. And so unfortunately, I think it's not super likely that we're going to get a lot of support for fair maps issues on the Republican side in the state legislature. But I live in hope. So and then, is this effort limited to only leveraging votes for specific redistricting maps? So no, so I think that what we're hoping to do with these teams is actually, especially right now, focus a lot on the other procedural elements. So like public hearings, transparency, that's the stuff that they can really work on right now. They're not going to be able to draw maps really until they get that data, or at least they're not going to be able to draw maps that they could actually enact until they get that data. So, So, there's a lot of, this is a broad range of issues. Also, one thing I do want to say is I actually was in a meeting with a lot of other partners today who, do other issues, do stuff like climate issues or reproductive rights or, union members and labor issues. And all of them are interested in redistricting, but they're all also, dealing with their own issues. And I think that, one thing that I'm also hoping we will do is, when there are, bad bills, like I know that there are a bunch of anti-immigrant bills in our state legislature, that we will be also, that we can call on you to do some minimal, like rapid actions and stuff like that to help out those people because, basically we're doing redistricting because redistricting is important, and redistricting is important because of what happens with all these other issues that directly impact people, right? So hopefully that answered that question. I know that was a super long answer. Dr. Brenda, I know two ladies that have good ideas, and just today we were speaking about gerrymandering and other obstacles we will face, especially for the midterms. They wanted to know if anyone knows how to get topics on the news. Does anyone have information on getting information into the media? So I will say that like we do make some efforts to get certain things, get like, I think especially in North Carolina, get sort of North Carolina newspapers to pick up things. And I think we will probably like try to do op-eds and stuff like that. So, and Alma Line National is like operating at this whole other level where they're like trying to get stories in the New York Times and stuff like that. So they do some of that. They do some of that work. I'm not like the person who's the expert on that, but I think that we will be at least trying to, get into like the Charlotte Observer and the Greensboro News and Record about stuff that we're doing. Right. So, Jack asks, is there draft legislation for reforming the redistricting process, a template for giving process out of the hand of politicians? This has been done in other states. Yeah, so I know that some work groups that we work with, like Common Cause and Democracy NC, have worked on reform bills that have been filed in the past. I would assume that we will probably see some kind of reform bill probably filed by Democratic legislators this time around. And I think that, we're gonna have to take a careful look at it. I just want to be frank that like we saw some redistricting bills that were filed in the past sessions that were not great, that actually would have reduced transparency, that sort of sold themselves as being, independent, nonpartisan, but actually would have made things kind of worse and harder because they basically they theoretically took their drawing power out of the hands of people like Phil Berger and Tom Moore and put it into the hands of the guy who Phil Berger and Tom Moore hired. So we've seen, so I think that we tend to be kind of cautious about what legislation we're going to support until we really see it, because in North Carolina, we've seen a whole range of redistricting bills. Some were good with maybe a couple problems, some were really bad. And so, I'm really hopeful that we're going to see some good reform legislation this year. But I think that, yeah, and Common Cause has reached out to us for like some advice and feedback on stuff that they want to work on, and we've been working with them that way. But I can't really say exactly what form that's going to take or when it's going to come out. All right. And then Dr. Monica asks, is there a way to give voters in a district a synopsis of what the voting outcomes might be based on current maps? In other words, if they do not change the maps showing specific issues that might likely win or may not support their needs. I think that's a really interesting idea. I think that maybe that can be part of, like I talked about earlier, what I'm really hoping to do is to get really geographically specific with people, to like do some sessions that are geographically focused. So if you live, especially if you live in some of these places that are real targets of gerrymandering, that we can walk through. I know that, like, for instance, Greenville is a huge target. Dr. Brenda Fairfax knows this. And if you look at the way the congressional map is drawn, it basically is carving out these sort of rich majority white suburbs to give Greg Murphy his seat. And, you know, and a lot of the majority Black neighborhoods are put into a different district. And these are, you know, there's obviously partisan decisions being made here. So what I'll say is like, I would love to give that kind of information when we start to be able to do the kind of geographically specific training. All right. And then Gail's asking, are you working with the League of Women Voters on this issue? Yeah, so I'd say that we've sat at some of the same tables as them, and I think that we have communication networks with the league. I think that the league is in, I'm just gonna say this, the league is in a different situation. So we're a C4 organization, which means we can do some political work. And the league is, you know, really needs to be nonpartisan. They do a lot of things like candidate forums and things like that, and voter guides. And, you know, I know that that's sort of, so there is, I think, some, we tend to keep in touch with each other, know what each other is doing. But because we kind of have those different roles, I think you probably won't see us like do a ton of events together or something like that, just to be real with y'all. All right, I think we got through all the questions. I'm gonna wait like 5 seconds, and if anyone has anything else, it'll pop up. Oh my God, someone did. So someone did. Dr. Brenda says, I attended a great session with You Can Vote last time. Are we working with them? Yes, actually, I had a really great, so if some of you attended the Fight for Fair Map Summit back in January, right before that, I had a really great meeting with You Can Vote, because they are really hoping to do a lot of these kinds of engagement around public hearings and turn their people out. And, you know, we had a really good conversation about how we might, you know, give them materials and background and stuff so that they can do those kinds of trainings for their people. So yeah, we're in touch with them. Okay. It's 6:45, so I think I'm going to call it. Thank you all for your really great questions. That was like so many questions. I'm so impressed that everyone is like disengaged. It just makes my day. And of course, you gave me the opportunity to sit up here and like talk about redistricting straight for like almost an hour, and that is also my other favorite thing. But anyway, I want to thank you all for being here. I'm going to put that link to the accountability team assignment form in the chat one more time, in case you haven't filled it out yet. Please fill that out. That is how we're going to sort you into an actual team and be able to follow up with actions for you. I will also send it out in an email after this meeting, probably tomorrow or Monday. But that's sort of like how we are actually going to be able to get this going. So please fill that out. And otherwise, I'd like to say that just thank you to everyone for being here. And, you know, again, fantastic to see everyone so engaged and so ready to go. I love y'all. This is like, yeah, sorry. This really made my day. I had a ton of Zoom meetings all day, and I felt like, oh, I'm so tired. I feel bad. I don't know how well I'm going to show up for people, but this is energizing. You all have great energy. So anyway, I want to thank you all again. And I also want to thank Bree, who is our new digital organizer, who's going to be with you all side by side on a lot of this stuff. And also I want to thank a couple of people who are with us behind the scenes. Genevieve, our staff assistant at HQ. And we actually have also a digital organizer, our digital organizer from Ohio here to kind of watch us, because North Carolina, you know, we're always leading the way. We're always doing new stuff. People want to learn from us. So anyway, thank you all again, and we will follow up with you with some next actions. And I love you all, and have a good night.